Classy Burgundy and Camel Outfits FW 2026-27, Ralph Lauren-inspired elegance. Introduction. Welcome to Classy Vibe Fashion, where I explore timeless elegance, modern sophistication, and the emotional language behind great style. Today, I'm diving into the world of classy burgundy and camel outfits inspired by Ralph Lauren's FW 2026-27 aesthetic, and honestly, this combination feels richer than ever this season. The moment I saw these tones paired together, I immediately understood why they continue to dominate luxury fashion conversations year after year. I think there's something deeply comforting yet undeniably powerful about this color story. The timeless appeal of burgundy. Burgundy has always fascinated me because it carries drama without becoming overwhelming. In my experience, brighter reds can sometimes feel too aggressive for everyday sophistication, but burgundy creates depth in a much more refined way. What I find interesting is how this shade communicates confidence quietly instead of demanding attention. It feels mature, intentional, and incredibly luxurious when styled correctly. Why camel never disappears. Camel is one of those colors that never truly leaves fashion, and I think there's a reason for that. Unlike trend-driven shades that quickly become dated, camel adapts effortlessly to changing styles and decades. In my experience, camel works because it softens an outfit while still maintaining structure and polish. What I find interesting is how this neutral can make even the simplest silhouette feel elevated. The magic of combining both shades. When burgundy and camel come together, the effect feels incredibly balanced to me. I think burgundy provides emotional richness while camel adds calm sophistication, and together they create visual harmony. In my experience, some color pairings compete with each other, but these tones actually enhance one another naturally. The warmth of both shades creates an atmosphere that feels luxurious without trying too hard. Ralph Lauren's influence. I think Ralph Lauren's influence on this aesthetic is impossible to ignore because the brand has mastered understated American luxury for decades. What I find interesting is how Ralph Lauren consistently makes classic dressing feel aspirational rather than outdated. In my experience, many brands struggle to modernize heritage style, but Ralph Lauren understands how to evolve without losing identity. That balance is exactly what makes this inspiration feel timeless. The power of tailored coats. One thing I immediately noticed in these FW 2026-27 looks was the importance of outerwear. I think a beautifully tailored camel coat can transform an entire outfit even when the clothing underneath remains simple. In my experience, people often underestimate how much structure outerwear adds to personal style. What I find interesting is how a long tailored coat instantly creates elegance through proportion alone. Burgundy knitwear and emotional warmth. The burgundy knit pieces especially stood out to me because they added emotional softness to the overall styling. I think knitwear works beautifully in deep wine tones because the texture enhances the richness of the color. In my experience, oversized sweaters can sometimes lose sophistication, but here they felt intentional and polished. The styling proved that comfort and elegance do not have to compete with each other. The quiet luxury effect. This entire aesthetic strongly reflects the quiet luxury movement, but I think it goes deeper than trend culture. What I find interesting is how understated elegance often leaves a stronger impression than loud fashion statements. Unlike most people who chase attention through dramatic styling, I believe refined simplicity creates lasting sophistication. The restraint in these looks is exactly what makes them memorable. Layering done correctly. Layering played a huge role in creating dimension throughout these outfits. In my experience, layering can quickly feel bulky if proportions are not carefully controlled. I think the success here came from balancing heavier camel outerwear with softer burgundy elements underneath. The contrast between structure and fluidity made every outfit feel visually complete. Accessories that complete the mood. The accessories added subtle richness without overpowering the clothing. I think leather gloves, structured handbags, and riding-inspired boots perfectly supported the Ralph Lauren atmosphere. What I find interesting is how accessories become more important when the color palette remains controlled and minimal. Every detail suddenly carries greater emotional weight. Why these colors feel expensive? I've always believed certain color combinations naturally communicate luxury, and burgundy with camel is one of them. In my experience, the richness comes from the warmth and depth both shades share. I think cooler palettes can sometimes feel distant emotionally, while these tones create intimacy and confidence. The visual effect feels polished without becoming cold or inaccessible. The feminine strength of the looks. There was also a quiet femininity throughout these outfits that I really appreciated. I think modern fashion often mistakes empowerment for sharpness or severity, but these looks approached confidence differently. What I find interesting is how softness can actually feel more powerful than exaggerated structure. The styling embraced elegance without sacrificing authority. Menswear inspiration in women's wear. I noticed subtle menswear inspiration throughout many of the combinations, especially in the tailoring and layering choices. In my experience, borrowing from menswear often creates sophistication because it introduces balance and discipline. I think Ralph Lauren-inspired fashion excels at blending masculine structure with feminine warmth. That contrast is what keeps the outfits visually interesting. Unexpected modernity. What surprised me most was how modern these classic colors suddenly felt again. I think many people associate Camel and Burgundy with traditional autumn fashion, but FW 2026-27 gave them renewed energy. In my experience, styling determines whether classic shades feel contemporary or outdated. Here, the cleaner silhouettes and softer layering made everything feel current. fashion that feels wearable. Unlike highly theatrical runway trends, these looks actually feel wearable in real life, and I appreciate that deeply. I think fashion becomes most powerful when people can realistically imagine themselves wearing it. What I find interesting is how practicality can sometimes enhance elegance instead of limiting creativity. These outfits felt aspirational, but still emotionally relatable. The psychology behind neutral dressing. Neutral dressing has a psychological effect that I think many people overlook. In my experience, earthy shades often create a sense of calm confidence both for the wearer and the observer. I think Burgundy and Camel work because they communicate stability, warmth, and maturity simultaneously. The emotional response feels subtle, but incredibly strong. A question about personal style. Watching these looks made me reflect on my own wardrobe choices and what elegance truly means today. I think many people are moving away from fast-changing trends and returning to timeless investment dressing. What about you? Would you choose bold statement colors, or do you prefer rich neutrals like Burgundy and Camel for fall styling? In my experience, the pieces we wear repeatedly are usually the ones that feel emotionally authentic to us. The lasting influence of Ralph Lauren Elegance. Ralph Lauren-inspired elegance continues to resonate because it understands aspiration in a very human way. I think the brand's visual language speaks to confidence, stability, and understated success rather than temporary hype. What I find interesting is how these aesthetics remain relevant even as trends constantly shift around them. True sophistication rarely depends on novelty alone. Why this aesthetic endures? The reason this aesthetic endures, in my opinion, is because it respects balance. I think the warmth of camel prevents burgundy from feeling too heavy, while burgundy keeps camel from becoming overly soft or predictable. In my experience, the strongest fashion combinations are built on contrast, working together rather than competing. That harmony creates timeless visual appeal. Closing thoughts. As I reflect on these classy burgundy and camel FW 2026-27 looks, I keep thinking about how elegance often comes from restraint rather than excess. I think Ralph Lauren-inspired fashion succeeds because it values timeless emotion over temporary spectacle. Which of these tones would you personally wear more often? Rich burgundy or sophisticated camel? If you enjoyed this deep dive into elevated fall fashion, make sure to subscribe to Classy Vibe Fashion for more timeless style inspiration and runway conversations.